Today I'm out shooting some birds in flight and also some birds on a nest, and I wanted to share with you the settings I'm using. And essentially I'm using two different groups of settings. One for actually birds in flight, so I'm going to be continuous autofocus full manual. And then I'm also going to be shooting birds when they land on a branch or in a nest, etc. So I want to be able to capture that as well. And so I'm going to have two different groups of settings, and I'm going to save them into two different My Sets, and then I'm going to program those My Sets into a function button. Okay, and you know, there's some basic rules of thumbs when you're shooting birds in flight. You know, you need to be at a very fast shutter speed. You know, 1/2000th of a second is a very common number, and I found that to be you know, pretty good number to use. And then I'll also be using auto ISO, etc. So let's just go ahead into the camera and see what those settings are. Now the base camera I'm going to be using is my Olympus OMD EM10 Mark II. But you know, these settings will apply to most of the Olympus cameras with the exception of the EM1 Mark II. That camera's got its own set of features that are much better suited for birds in flight than I can do on any of these cameras. My PL8, my Pen F, and my EM10. So, excuse me, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to fire up this camera, and let's go ahead and do a basic reset. And I apologize for the planes flying overhead, but I wanted to do these things in the field. Okay, so what's the first thing I do? Okay, let's go into, first of all, shooting menu number 1, natural color picture profile, but let's go into the picture mode and change this to large fine. Now I'm going to change this to large superfine as we get further down in the menu so I get the best resolution. Okay, now that's all we need to do here. Oops. Now in shooting menu 2, there's nothing here either because, you know, these are all specialty things for bracketing, HDR, multiple exposure, etc. So we don't need to worry about anything in here. Don't need to worry about the playback menu. Okay, now in the custom menu, I'm going to go into the autofocus menu first. And for autofocus modes, we're going to be doing still pictures, and I'm going to set this to continuous autofocus. Okay. Now there is a continuous autofocus with tracking, which I didn't find to be very effective because you know, the tracking, it kind of jumps all over the place, and I'd rather just do continuous autofocus, okay, in a specific group of focus points in the camera, and we'll get to that here shortly. Okay, full-time autofocus off, fine, AFL, okay. Now I do want to make sure, single point autofocus mode 1, no problem, because I will be shooting single point autofocus. But for continuous autofocus, I want to make sure this is in mode 2, where I halfway press the shutter and it starts the autofocus action, and then fully pressing will start to take the pictures in, you know, very quickly in whatever setting I have, okay? Alright, now, reset lens to on, I don't care, doesn't mean anything here, and okay, now set home. I'm going to just do this out of habit because this is the focusing mode I'm going to be using by default. So if I get the opportunity, I need to set it back to the default. I can do it very quickly if I have this set. But actually in practice, I never use this, so we'll just go through that quickly. Illumination, I'm going to turn off. We don't need that. Face detect, make sure that's off. AF area pointer, I like that to be on because then I get the little green box showing me where the focus point is, and ideally it's going to be in a center group, and we'll get to that. And targeting pad I'm going to turn off. Okay, for button functions, what I've set up is I've set up my function 1 button to be magnify, and this will come in handy when I need to zoom in for you know, birds in a tree or in a nest. I can punch in and make sure that the autofocus acquired focus on what I wanted it to, because usually you're shooting things really far away and it's hard to tell, at least for me, just looking at the live view without magnifying, if I got acquired focus properly or not. Okay, and then function 2, which is the one over here on the right, it has the highlight shadow icon on it on top of the camera. this is the button I'm going to set to my single point autofocus. Okay, so when I want to capture birds sitting in a nest or on a tree, etc., or any kind of still shot. And then the next one here, function 3, I programmed, and this is the one over here by the power button, the function 3 button. I've programmed this to be my continuous autofocus birds in flight settings, okay? And that's what I'm going to set that up for, and we'll do that here in just a second. And everything else here we don't care about. Okay, dial functions, nothing else I care about in here. Okay, so for release, I do care about things in here. Now for single point autofocus, I'm going to make sure this is off. Okay, and what does that mean? If we click the info button, it tells you, actually gives you a good description, which sometimes it doesn't. If on is selected, then the shutter can be released even when the camera is not in focus in S-AF, single point autofocus. So I'm going to make sure this is off because I don't want the camera to take a picture if it doesn't think it's in focus, okay? So we'll make sure that's off. Now continuous autofocus, release priority C, I'm also going to turn this off, okay? Because again, I don't want the camera to take pictures, particularly when I'm taking multiple pictures every second, to take a picture when it's out of focus. Okay, now I do leave that on if I'm manually focusing and pre-focusing on a specific point, okay? It makes sense to do that, and I've talked about that in other videos. But for birds in flight, I'm going to turn this off so it only takes a picture when it has acquired focus. Okay, and that'll save you a lot of space on your memory card and sifting through a lot of bad pictures. Because believe me, we're going to get a lot of bad pictures out of focus, but occasionally we'll get a really good one, okay? Hopefully more often than not. Okay, and everything else here, the defaults are fine, okay? Sorry, let's go back in. Image stabilizer. Okay, I like to turn the image stabilizer to just leave that in auto. Okay, but there's one more line item here, image stabilizer off, okay? Now this only applies to when you're in continuous autofocus, and that's fine by me. I don't want the camera to worry about stabilizing the lens when I'm at 1/2000th second shutter speed, right? So I can turn this off so the camera will focus more on trying to acquire focus than trying to stabilize the image and thereby delaying another potential shot. Wait for this plane, I'm sorry. So I turn this one off, okay? And if you don't have this line item in your camera, it's best just to have autofocus turned or image stabilization turned off in general when you're doing birds in flight. Okay. And everything else here we can leave as is. Release lag time is on short, that's fine. Nothing here in the display menu. Okay, exposure. We do want to change some things in here. Now noise reduction is mainly for long exposures, but noise filter, I'm going to turn this off, okay? Because the noise filter basically is for your JPEGs, and if I'm in very low light, you know, I'm out street shooting in the evening, yeah, I'm going to turn the filter to low but not higher. But if I'm doing birds in flight and the lighting here is pretty decent, even if it's not decent, I don't want the camera to start smudging details or doing any additional processing more than it has to when it's writing JPEGs. Okay, ISO auto is fine, and ISO auto set. Okay, now I'm going to bump this up to 6400. Hopefully it never has to go that high. Okay, so for birds in flight, I want to have some headroom in the ISO, so if I need a faster shutter speed, I can get that. Now again, in this lighting, I don't think it'll be a problem, but I do set that. And auto ISO, I set to all, okay? You can set it to PA and S, but I will be shooting in manual, so I need to change this to all. Okay. And then for metering, I like to change this to center weighted, because usually, hopefully I got the bird filling some of the frame and I wanted to expose for that bird in the center of the frame. more so than, say, the sky. And sometimes you have to dial in some exposure compensation, but you know, when the light's changing constantly, unless you're really good, you can go to spot meter, but center weighted meter works for me. Okay, and there's another reason I like to use center weighted metering, and that's because in the live view, you get a nice big circle in the center of the live view, so that it helps you frame and make sure you got the bird in the center where we're going to be grouping our focus points, and we'll come to that. Okay, and there's nothing else here we need to change. And don't need to do anything with flash. Now we do need to change something here in the pixel icon. And I'm going to change this to superfine. Okay? That way we're getting the highest quality JPEG possible. And I will be just shooting JPEG, basically, for the birds in flight, because I want to have the longest buffer possible. If you're shooting JPEG plus RAW, you might lose 1 or 2 seconds on your buffer, which, you know, normally you can get 5-10 seconds is what I've been getting. But anyway, I'm going to turn that to superfine to get the best quality. Okay, shading compensation off, etc., etc. Keep warm colors. Let's turn this off because I don't want any weird colors on my birds. And we're good here. Quick erase, I'm going to turn this on. Now, as a best practice, you never want to delete pictures in the camera. Normally you want to download them all to your computer, then delete the ones while they're on your computer. Because there's a potential for card corruption when you're deleting them through the camera. Now, I've never had a problem, so I'm just going to delete them in camera. But I'm just letting you know, as a best practice, you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, let's see. Lead by example, as they say, right? I'm not doing that today. Okay, everything else looks good. And then utility, nothing here. I did turn the battery level up to +2, so that way I get as early a warning as possible when the battery starts to get low. Usually I'll see the battery icon come on when there's 2 bars, when I have this set to +2. You know, it's just peace of mind. It really... As soon as I see a red blinking icon, I change batteries, so. Okay, let's see. And that's it. Okay, now we need to go in the super control panel. And we're going to change this to... Okay, we're going to change the focusing points because I don't want it to focus on the entire frame. What I want it to do is focus on a group of 9 points on here. So let me show you how to do that. What you do is when you're in this mode, you click the info button, and then you just push the up or down arrow, and you can see that indicated here, right? If I push up, you'll see it goes into 9 point. I can push up again, it goes into a single point, or a single fine point I like to call it. And then here, this is the single point. But I like to group it into 9 and then click OK. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll move this up one row. Okay, and the reason I do that is because a lot of times the birds are flying over a horizon, so I don't want to frame it, you know, while the bird's in the horizon. I want to frame the bird while he's slightly above the horizon, right? And that's all. I mean, but generally I want to stay as close to the center as possible outside of that 1 row. And let me check the super control panel again. Okay, I do need to change my shutter speed to continuous low. And I prefer to shoot continuous low anti-shock, although I believe when you're over 1/320th of a second, it's kind of a moot point. But, you know, just out of habit, I like to shoot in anti-shock. Okay, and now you'll see that we're in large superfine, not just large fine, as we had selected before. And ISO auto, etc. And everything else looks good. Okay, so let's go into manual, double check my control panel. Everything's still looking good. I'm going to bump my shutter speed up to 2000. Okay, so let's save this into my function button number 3. Okay, everything I just did. So we go into the menu, we go into shooting menu 1, go to reset my set, scroll down to, and I'm going to save it into my set number 4. Okay, I'm going to click over to the right and then click OK here. Okay, and it's important you click over to the right first and then you can save it and click OK. Because if I just click OK right here, it's going to ask me, do I want to set everything that's saved there? No, I want to save everything to that spot. Okay, now let's set up the single point autofocus or single shot autofocus for the birds when they're in a nest or in a tree. Okay, and there's not much to that. I'm going to go, and I normally like to shoot in aperture priority when I'm doing single point autofocus. And I'm going to change, the only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change this to single shot. I'm going to change this to single point autofocus. And then I'm going to roll this to, we'll leave it in auto. And that's all I need to do. Okay, so let's save this to the my set number 3 and put that into function button number 2. Okay. And there we have it. So now, when I'm out with the camera and I want to do birds in flight, I just click this button, right? And you can see it says my set 4. We're in manual, shutter speed 2000, auto ISO, continuous autofocus, right? And then I can fire off a few shots. But then the bird lands and he's sitting in a tree, and I want to do single point autofocus, so I'll switch over to this, my set number 3, and now we're in single shot, right? So I can switch between these two modes very quickly. For birds in flight, continuous autofocus. For birds sitting around, single point autofocus. And that's how I'm going to be shooting today. I'm using just the Olympus 40-150 kit lens. Well, it's not really a kit lens, but it's, you know, it's an f4. It's a $99 lens all day long. Oh, it's harder than it looks. Alright, so I have my 75-300. This is the f4.8 to f5 or 6 something. And you know, it's a nice little lens. It has really good reach out to 300 millimeters. And you can pick it up all day long for like $300-400 used or refurbed. I got mine for, I think I paid like $450, but in any case, let's give this lens a shot, because I'm going to try and get the, there's an osprey nest out there. So I really need a much longer reach than I was able to get with my 150 millimeters. So let's see what kind of shots we can get with this lens. Alright, now there's some osprey sitting out there perched, and right now I'm in the continuous autofocus. This is my birds in flight setting. Now if you remember, I did set the my set number 3 to be my single point, like if I want to take shots of birds in trees or sitting on a perch. And I programmed that over here to the function 2 button. So I'm just going to push that. And you'll notice that I changed into aperture priority. And I'm going to go up here and, yeah, this is a lot easier. And let me punch in and zoom a little bit. Make sure I got focus in. There we go. And let's take a look. Not bad. They're not looking at me at all. Hold on. Let me try again. Zoom out slightly. Not bad. Try these settings for yourself and let me know how you do in the comments below, okay? But otherwise, hopefully we'll see you again soon. God, I'm so sorry. Let me try this again without a freaking plane. God, the freaking airplane.